In Miami, Kevin Magnussen amassed 5 penalty points for his various shenanigans throughout the weekend. That now puts him on 10 penalty points for the whole season, and not just that, but 10 penalty points in the last 5 races alone. Before the 5 in Miami, he received 3 penalty points in Jeddah for colliding with Albon and driving Tsunoda off the track, and then he received a further 2 penalty points in China for spinning out Tsunoda. For those that don't know, once you reach 12 penalty points, that earns you an automatic race ban. And since 2014, when this system was introduced, no one, not even the great Pastor Maldonado, has ever actually reached that limit and had a race ban. What's worse is that the penalty points get taken away after 12 months from the day that you earned them, and given that he's collected all of these points this early into the season, that means that for the rest of 2024 until early 2025, he's somehow got to keep his nose clean in the chaos of the midfield or risk being banned for a race at some point this season. And now, K-Mag has always been one of the more fierier drivers on the grid. He has had infamous scrapes with his now teammate Nico Hulkenberg, and he's even had multiple collisions with his actual teammate at the time, Romain Grosjean. He's just one of those drivers that never backs down, and whilst on paper that sounds great, sometimes it has been to his detriment. The best drivers on the grid, and specifically the drivers who have had the best racecraft throughout their careers, are the ones who judge that fine line between aggression and restraint better than anyone else. This season, however, partly due to circumstance, but also partly down to his own mistakes, not only is his driving getting to the point of being a little bit ridiculous, but it's also getting to the point where it could seriously start affecting his future in Formula 1. As I have mentioned a few times this season, due to how the top teams have actually developed away from the back of the grid, the bottom 5 teams are basically all fighting for scraps, and even finishing in P10 as we saw with Ocon in Miami is almost like a win for some of these teams. It's pretty obvious that in Jeddah and then in the sprint in Miami, K-Mag, whether he was instructed by the team or not, decided to play the team game to give Nico Hulkenberg a better chance of scoring even 1 point, which he eventually did in both races. Now, he did this by either backing the pack up like he did in Jeddah to give Nico a free pit stop, or just holding everyone back by any means necessary to lessen the pressure on Nico's shoulders. And now, this is not new. Defensive driving is a part of motorsport, and the best possible example that you'll ever see of this was by Fernando Alonso in Hungary in 2021 when he halted Lewis's progress by enough laps to give teammate Esteban Ocon the best possible chance to hold on to the win, which of course Ocon did. Alonso's drive that day, and even Hamilton himself, because it does take 2 to tango, was nothing short of masterful. Yes, they did slightly touch at one point, but from both drivers there was a huge amount of respect, and it was the perfect balance of aggression and restraint. And even though it wasn't Fernando who won the race, his racecraft and performance that day was every bit as good as Ocon's under pressure. The problem for Magnussen is that he just doesn't have that same level of racecraft as an Alonso. His defensive driving since the start of this season has looked more desperate than it has been controlled, and it's starting to do more damage to him than it is helping his team. There has been far too many moments where he's just crashed into other cars and ruined their races entirely, like with Albon in Jeddah, Tsunoda in China, and then Sargent in Miami. The fact that he has crashed into 3 different drivers within the space of 5 races, I think is a serious red flag. If this was Logan Sargent, we would be hammering the guy, but with Magnussen, somehow it's all gotten blurred into the background because he's managed to play a small part in his teammates scoring points. On top of those blatant incidents, he's also developed a habit whilst defending from the cars behind of outbraking himself and driving people off the road, like with Tsunoda in Jeddah and then Hamilton in Miami. And now, to his credit, and I think this is really important to mention, K-Mag has for the most part taken full accountability for most of the penalties. After the sprint in Miami where he picked up 35 seconds worth of penalties, he said, "Yeah, they were fair. All of the penalties were fair, but I had to do my thing to protect Nico. Make the space, same story as in Jeddah. I got some penalties, we got some points as a team, and it kind of sucks for me." And now on the flip side, I also saw a lot of people after Miami defending what K-Mag was doing, and there were fans who felt frustrated that he was being penalized for what they thought was just hard racing. And now this is something that different people are going to feel a different way about, because every single person has their own interpretation of where the line is between hard racing and dangerous driving. Some of what K-Mag was doing, in particular against Lewis, was perfectly fine. Defending the inside line, braking late enough to make the apex, washing the car out wide to squeeze the car on the outside, all of that to me is perfectly fine. But once you start outbraking yourself and running yourself and the car on your outside off the track, that to me is where I draw the line. Or when a driver admits to knowingly drive in a manner that is more focused on stopping the car behind, even if it means going over the limit, this starts to cross over the line to unsportsmanlike behavior. Remarkably, McLaren team principal Andrea Stella came out and had some pretty choice words about Magnussen's driving. We have a case of a behavior being intentional in terms of damaging another competitor. This behavior is perpetuated within the same race and repeated over the same season. Maybe you need to spend a few weekends at home with your family, reflecting on your sportsmanship, and then go back. This should be addressed immediately, because if you are out of the points and you get 20 seconds or whatever at the end of your race, it doesn't make any difference. But for the competitor that you have damaged, you have put them out of their race, again, in a deliberate, perpetuated, and repeated way. It's completely unacceptable. And now, keep in mind, McLaren and Stella aren't fighting Haas. Team principals, when they feel it's advantageous to their teams, take digs at their direct competitors all the time. But McLaren have nothing to gain from this. That is why what Stella said I think holds a lot of weight, because I think the motivation behind it isn't to gain some kind of advantage over Haas, not that they'd need one anyway, but I think it's genuinely more about the precedent and ethics of racing that I think Stella thinks Magnussen is breaking with his driving. The reason why I found this statement by Stella so interesting is because he pointed out some things that even I was thinking as well, which is that in incidents like these where drivers are deliberately driving in an unsportsmanlike and potentially dangerous way multiple times during a season, I am not sure that the current set of penalties really punish them enough. Overtaking is difficult in F1 even if you have a faster car. In Miami, the Mercedes was on average one of the slowest cars in a straight line compared to the Haas, which was one of the fastest. Around a track where the only real overtaking opportunities were at the end of the back straight with DRS, it shows why track position can be so important. Given that K-Mag wasn't going to score points, he basically decided to buy penalties in exchange for track position. The 10-second time penalties that he kept being given were meaningless as long as he stayed ahead of Hamilton to slow him down, even if it meant staying ahead of him by driving erratically off track and gaining an advantage. This situation exposed a major flaw in the 5 and 10-second on-track time penalties that have become standard in Formula 1. I think in the future the stewards have got to look at drive-through penalties as an alternative, which would force the offending car to get out of the way, especially in a situation like this where the driver is deliberately looking to keep track position in an unsportsmanlike way. Now, where that balance is of giving out a 5-second, 10-second drive-through or even stop-go penalty is the difficult bit. We have different stewards at every single race, and by definition that means that we won't ever have 100% consistency across every track and every incident, because the people deciding how to implement the rules are different at every single race. Although the threat of being banned for a race might seem like the biggest takeaway from all of these incidents, the bigger problem for K-Mag is that the reason he found himself in these positions is because he himself has underdelivered. And I think that this, in combination with his erratic driving, is starting to seriously put his future at the team and his future in Formula 1 in real jeopardy. In the event that K-Mag does trigger a one-race ban, the team will no doubt bring in Ollie Bearman as his substitute. Since making his FP1 debut for them in 2023, the Ferrari Jr. has been hotly tipped to almost be a shoo-in at the team for 25. And his one-off performance for Ferrari in Jeddah, I think all but confirmed the massive potential that Bearman has. And now on paper, given that Nico Hulkenberg is leaving for Sauber in 25, many would assume that a lineup of K-Mag and Behrman is almost automatic, mixing the experience with the youth. But given how Hulkenberg has outperformed K-Mag, I think Haas are seriously questioning whether K-Mag is really good enough at this stage of his career to be their lead driver and the benchmark for Behrman. Let's not forget that one of the reasons that Hulkenberg was brought into this team in the first place was because, although in 2022 K-Mag had some amazing highlight performances and comfortably beat Mick Schumacher, Günther Steiner always felt that up against Mick, K-Mag was almost too comfortable and was leaving results on the table with his inconsistency. In 2023 and now in 2024, Nico Hulkenberg has kind of ended up proving Steiner right, as he has outperformed K-Mag and exposed some of those limitations and inconsistencies. When you combine those limitations that the team know Magnussen has, and then add the horrible form in terms of driving that he is in right now, I don't think that Haas can be confident that just because he's been there for a long time, that he is still the right driver to be kept on, especially if he is your lead driver. Although some people might find it risky to have an all-new driver lineup in 2025, especially with one of them being a rookie, as McLaren proved in 2019 when they had Carlos and Lando, if it's the right two drivers that deliver on the car's potential, then no one is even going to care about that 2 or 3 races into the season. Gene Haas has already come out and said that he won't make any decision about the team's 2025 driver lineup until the summer break, meaning K-Mag still has time to clean up his act and change the narrative that he has created. As things stand with the way that he is performing right now, with drivers like Bottas, Ocon, Ricciardo, Gasly and others all out of contract, I'd rather have any of them over K-Mag alongside Behrman right now. If Magnussen isn't able to start outperforming Hulkenberg and continues to make these clumsy and erratic mistakes which make him look like a liability, then not only will he miss out on one race in 2024, he'll be out of racing in F1 permanently in 2025. Well, there you have it. If you did enjoy this video and want to support the channel, then don't forget to subscribe. That would be massively appreciated, and I'll see you in the next one.